Your precious words echo in my ears, hoping I'm the
Hi everyone, it's LB with House of Color. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I am going to be sharing my birth story with you. This is the real, raw, and unedited version of everything that happened during my labor and delivery. If you guys saw my birth vlog, that was more of a sentimental video for me that I wanted to put together in remembrance of my daughter's birthday. But if you're tuning into this video, this is the real, the raw, the TMI version. I had posted a picture of how dramatic of an experience I had on my Instagram story, and I'm so excited to share with you my feelings, thoughts, and everything that went through my head that day that I gave birth, because it was a very dramatic experience for me. I have everything written down, all the details, all the nitty-gritty stuff. That way I don't forget anything. So if I'm looking on my phone, you guys know what I'm doing. Today is February 14th. Sophia is 10 days old officially today. Let's rewind all the way back to January 30th. That day I was craving bubble tea. So we went out to Kung Fu Tea. I went inside, grabbed my boba tea order, and then I was holding 3 cups. It was cold outside, so I had my big puffy jacket, I had my Uggs on, and I am super clumsy, you guys. So I was walking out, and there's this little black thing that was on the sidewalk, and I tripped over it. Of course, me, 9 months pregnant, I tripped over this thing, and I fell. I fell to the floor. Luckily, I did not fall straight on my belly because that would have been really, really bad. So I fell on my arm. My left arm caught my fall, and then my bump just took like the tiniest little thing like that. But it was very scary because, of course, I'm 9 months pregnant. I called my doctor and I was like, hey, I just fell. I told them exactly what happened, and they told me just go in to the hospital and get monitored, tell them what happened. Even though you had no impact to your belly, it's better safe than sorry. So we went to the hospital and I got monitored and I was fine. They had me doing a non-stress test and the baby looked great, so I got sent home. I didn't even realize how hard I fell because I had this ginormous bruise on my arm that kept getting darker and darker every single day. And if you guys are familiar with bruises, it just keeps getting worse and worse before it gets better, right? So it started changing colors like purple and yellow. I was joking and I was like, when I go to the hospital and give birth, they're gonna think that baby daddy hits me. So that was Thursday. Monday, I had my usual weekly appointment. I had an NST, I had an ultrasound, and then a follow-up with my OB. And so we did the NST, great. We did the ultrasound, not so great. So if you guys have been following me for a while, you know that I've had a history of low amniotic fluids with both kids. I've always been monitored towards the end of my pregnancy for the same issue. This pregnancy, however, I've been measuring great. But on that day, my fluids fell from a 10 the week before all the way to a 3.9. If you guys are familiar with how pregnancies go, 5 is considered low. So anything below a 5 is considered dangerous. I was just 1 day shy of being 39 weeks, so I was pretty far along already. I went to my follow-up visit and they checked me. I was still 2 centimeters dilated, maybe 2.5. I've been at a 2 for about 3 weeks at this point, and they said that because my fluids were so low and because I was already so far along, that they were either going to induce me that night or the next morning. Also, I was already scheduled for an induction on February the 8th. So they decided to go ahead and schedule me for induction at 7 a.m. on the next morning, February the 4th. So I was like, okay, that's fine. I've been induced the last 2 pregnancies. I know what to expect. My main concern is a healthy baby. Anything for a healthy delivery, healthy baby, I'm all for. Fast forward to later that evening, I went home, I took a shower, I got ready, shaved my vagina, got everything nice and tidy and ready for the induction the following morning. Packed up my hospital bag, made sure that I had everything. I was texting my girlfriends around 7:30. Everything was fine. I ate a nice meal, and then at 8:30, you guys, everything changed. I remember I was in the bathroom, I had taken a shower and I had done my skincare routine, and I started walking out of the bathroom, and then all of a sudden I felt this contraction. Mind you, I've never really known what a contraction feels like just because I've been induced my last 2 pregnancies, so I never really knew what a real contraction felt like. I just felt like my stomach was hurting. The best way I can describe it is like period pains, cramps. I was like, whoa, cramp, 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 cramp. I just kind of bent over, and then I got on my knees a little bit to kind of breathe through the contraction, and then it went away, and then I was okay, I'm fine, I'm normal. Wow, that was kind of a weird pain. I continued doing something, and then again I felt another contraction. And I'm like, ow, 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 ow. Pain level from 1 to 10, it was probably like a 2. And then I got another one, and I was like, okay, I think these are contractions. So I downloaded the contraction app, and then I started timing my contractions. I was having contractions about every 7 minutes, and they were lasting a minute long. At this time, we were trying to put the kids to sleep. The whole time I was having these contractions, baby daddy was like, we need to go to the hospital. We need to go to the hospital. And I'm like, no, we don't need to go to the hospital because A, there's a snowstorm going outside. B, I don't want to be turned away. And C, we need to put the kids to sleep. He's like freaking out because he does not want to deliver his own child at home. So he's like, no, we gotta go, we gotta go. And I'm like, just chill, okay? Let's put the kids to sleep and then we can figure it out. My cramps started getting a little bit more painful. At this point, I decided, okay, I'm gonna call the hospital to see what I should do. I called the birthing center at the hospital, and I spoke to the nurse, telling her my situation. I'm having these contractions 5 minutes apart. Like, should I head into the hospital? And she advised me to start heading in at 3 minutes. Now, you guys, let me just tell you, that was bad. She should not have told me that, because when you are 5 minutes apart, you need to take your ass to the hospital. Because if you're on, say, your second, third child like me, that thing comes flying out. She shouldn't have told me to wait. Anyway, I listened to her and I waited it out. JJ fell asleep first, and then Preston, he was sensing that something was wrong because he saw how uncomfortable I was feeling. So he didn't fall asleep right away, and he just stayed up to see if I was okay. At this point, I went downstairs because my contractions started getting a lot worse, and I was laying on the couch. My contractions started doing something very weird. It started being 10 minutes apart instead of 5 minutes apart. It was starting to have longer intervals, but it started to last longer. So instead of my contractions being about a minute long, it started being 2 minutes long now. The pain started getting really, really bad. And I remember it was around 10:30. I was laying on the couch and I text baby daddy, where are you? He rushed down and I was just in pain, and I was just like, and he's like, okay, I'm starting the car, I'm starting the car. So he started the car. I went upstairs to make sure that I had everything in my hospital bag, and my mom came out and she saw how much pain I was in, and she said, oh, your stomach hurts. Okay, well, it's time. It's time you go to the hospital. And she gave me some words of reassurance. She said, you can't give birth if your stomach doesn't hurt. And I'm like, yeah. Ow. We decided to head over to the hospital. Luckily, we only live about 8 minutes away. And that was another reason why I didn't want to go right away. Just because we live so close, if anything were to happen, it literally is down the street. But baby daddy did not care. He said, if they're turning us away, I am sleeping in the lobby. It was around 11 p.m. at night, and the main entrance was closed, so we had to go through the emergency entrance. And when I went through the emergency entrance, we had to walk through the hospital to get to labor and delivery, go up to the 3rd floor. When I arrived to labor and delivery, my contractions were getting a lot worse. At this point, they were hurting to the point where I could not even concentrate on anything except just getting through the contractions. As we were checking in, the guy was asking me a bunch of questions and I just could not answer him. Luckily, they had my chart all ready to go. I think I was able to give them my name. They had my chart all ready because I was supposed to be induced at 7 a.m. that morning. I had done pre-registration and everything for the hospital, so they had all my paperwork, and the guy realized that I could not even talk anymore. So they wheelchaired me back to triage, and the nurses helped me get undressed, and they hooked me up to the monitors, and the nurse checked me, and I was 5 centimeters dilated at that time. Now let me remind you guys, I have been at a 2 for 3 weeks, and just that morning when I went to go get checked at the doctor's, they told me I was still a 2, maybe a 2.5. The thing about labor I realize now is that things can progress quickly and you just never know. So the nurses asked me how I felt about an epidural, and I told her ideally I would not like one, but I was asking questions to see if I changed my mind, how I would get it, how accessible it was to me, and how quickly I can get it. I asked her, how quickly can I get the epidural if I decided that I wanted to get one? And she said that because the floor was not busy at all right now, the anesthesiologist would be able to get to me very quickly. So I said, okay, great. About 10 minutes went by and the nurse checked me again, and she said, oh, okay, you've dilated to a 6. So at this point, they realized that I am in fact in active labor. So they rolled me over to the labor and delivery room, and they set me up and everything. And at this point, my contractions started getting really, really bad. On a pain scale of 1 to 10, I would say that it was like a 12. It was so painful. Now, mind you, I have a very, very high pain tolerance, and it was just insane. I don't know if it's because I wasn't mentally prepared for it, but a lot of times when I go through these physically draining situations, I can handle it really well by just talking to myself and just talking myself out of the pain. But for some reason, this time it was just so painful. If you've ever experienced having a child and labor pains, they don't call it labor pains for fun, honey, okay? These contractions hurt like a mother. The best way I would be able to describe this pain is if somebody was twisting your intestines. It wasn't like your stomach area where you can kind of rub. It was down in the pelvic area, and the pain was just like somebody twisting it and just keep twisting the crap out of your intestine. And sometimes it would feel like knives just jabbing you. So at this point, they put an IV in me. They started the fluids, and they also started the antibiotics. Because I tested positive for group B strep, they have to start the antibiotic about 4 hours prior to me giving birth. That way I don't pass it on to the baby. I've been watching YouTube videos up until this point about labor and delivery stories, and everyone talks about how they have breaks between each contraction so they can catch their breath. But I never really had a break. When I went into labor and delivery, the contractions started coming on so fast and so heavy, and I did not have a break in between to catch my breath. It was just constant pain. And I remember I was holding baby daddy's hand with my right hand, and I was clawing the crap out of his hand. I remember the look in my eyes, and I looked at him and I said, you did this to me, in my head. I'm like, you did this to me. And I remember at one point, the nurses were helping me do something, and I almost clawed her, and I probably would have been sued for physically harming a nurse, but I just felt like I was in so much pain. If you ever watch movies of ladies giving birth and they're screaming their head off, that was me. Okay. Prior to experiencing this on my own, I really thought those people were extremely dramatic, and I'm like, seriously, it's hurting that bad? It hurts that bad. At this point, my pain was just through the roof. Nurses realized that, so they asked me again very gently. They're like, well, would you like an epidural? I asked the nurse, what do you think? And she said, I mean, I'm not here to persuade you to either get it or not get it, but just remember, it's not going to get any better from here. If you do decide to get an epidural and you are dilated to a 7 or an 8, then you can't get it anymore. This is when something went off in my head, and I said to myself, okay, if I do this naturally, if I'm able to fight through these contractions and make it all the way to 10 centimeters dilated, and I am not able to push because I do not physically have the strength to do it anymore, and then I have to get a C-section, no, I can't risk that. Because what's more scarier for me than recovering from an epidural is a C-section. I did not want that at all. So I'm like, okay, you know what? It's probably a better idea if I go ahead and get the epidural and just deal with it later. And who knows how long these labor pains are gonna last. Is it gonna be an hour? If it's gonna be an hour, then okay, at least there's a light at the end of the tunnel. But is it gonna be 3 hours? 4 hours? Oh, girl, no, I am not sitting through this for another 3 hours. No, I cannot do it. I won't do it. And also, what if I tear? Then I'm going to feel every single stitch that the doctor is sewing up my vagina. You know what? I'm not going to be a hero. I don't have nothing to prove to nobody. Give me the epidural right now. So as soon as I said, okay, give me the epidural, the anesthesiologist miraculously appeared out of nowhere. He was like my knight in shining armor. He started doing the epidural. And the thing about getting an epidural is you have to be completely frozen when they inject you. If you do move when they're doing the epidural, it could be very, very, very dangerous for you. Luckily, the anesthesiologist did my epidural and it kicked in almost right away. It was about 5 minutes when the epidural kicked in and I became a brand new person. Prior to the epidural, you guys, I was possessed. I was an animal. I was just a hot ass mess. I've always dreamt of this beautiful unmedicated birth. I had this image in my head where I would have the baby and they would plop it on my chest. We would do skin to skin and my hair is blowing and I'm glowing and I'm beautiful, and it was just the complete opposite. I didn't give a shit about my hair. I didn't give a shit about how I sounded or how I looked because I was screaming at the top of my lungs. And I'm pretty sure the hospital staff have seen this once or twice in their professional career. So no big deal. As soon as the epidural hit, I was a brand new person. I was relaxed. I saw the contractions on the screen, but I was numb where I didn't feel it. Also, here's a really good tip. If you guys are sensitive to medication like I am, tell your anesthesiologist that you want the very bare minimum of the epidural because you want to be able to still move your legs and wiggle your feet. So I told him that I'm very sensitive to medication. I don't even take Tylenol. So give me the bare minimum of the epidural. And that's what he did. I was still able to move my legs and still wiggle my toes because that is very important when you go into the actual pushing part of your labor, because when you feel pressure coming on, that's when you push. That's why it's important if you are sensitive to medication to just ask for the bare minimum. And also they give you a little button to get more of the epidural if you feel like it's not enough. The doctor arrived and he checked me. I was 8 centimeters dilated. 15 or so minutes go by and they checked me again. I was still 8 centimeters dilated, and this is when they gave me the peanut ball to put between my legs to get everything going a little bit quicker. And the peanut ball was a miracle because it really did get everything going. And the next thing I knew, I was dilated to a 10. And at 117, I remember the doctor came to check me and he's like, okay, you're 10, it's time, it's go time. And I'm like, what? It's go time? So everything was just happening so fast, you guys, compared to my other births. This was so fast because the other ones I had time to relax, had everything set up, do my hair, do my makeup, and text people. This one, it came out of nowhere. So they started setting up the doctor. He got his gloves on, he got his scrub thing on, and then they started prepping the room. So then the doctor said, okay, I see a little contraction coming on. Let's give it a little trial push. And he's like, okay, go. And I was like, okay. So I gave it a little trial push and he's like, okay, head out. And I said, what? So mind you, this was around 120. And then the next contraction, he's like, okay, now give it one more push. And I said, now go? And he's like, yep, go. And I was like, I pushed and he's like, okay, shoulders, baby's out. I delivered the baby in 3 minutes, you guys. 2 pushes and 3 minutes. From 120 to 123, that's when she was born. Poor girl was bruised. She had a blood vessel pop in her eye because she came out so fast. Baby daddy and I both were just in shock, and I did not have time to register anything. So when they put the baby on me, I just didn't even know how to react. I just lay there and I was just like, what the hell just happened? I have no idea what happened. What just happened? So at this hospital, they do things a little bit differently. They do this thing called the golden hour, and it's the first time I've ever heard of it. After you deliver, they give you an hour to bond with your baby, do skin to skin before they weigh them and do all the checks and stuff. And when they put her on my chest and we were doing skin to skin, I could not register the fact that I just had a baby. It was a little bit scary when she first came out because she didn't cry right away. It took her about 30 seconds or so to cry, and the nurse had to make her cry. She kind of pat her back a little bit to make her cry. After she cried, I felt really relieved because it's not a good sign if your baby's not crying. When they had her on my chest, she was breathing a little bit weird. She was like, I kept asking the nurse, is that normal? Should you guys be doing these checks on her before you give her to me? Because I don't want to risk her health. I guess she said that everything was fine with the baby. So they left me alone for an hour with the baby. And the whole time we were doing skin to skin, I was just in shock still. To be completely honest with you, I could not bond with the baby during that hour. How quickly everything happened, that I couldn't process the fact that my daughter was laying on my chest now instead of in my belly. After that golden hour, they came back in and they weighed her, measured her, did all the checks and stuff, and she was 6 pounds 9 ounces. And poor thing, they made a little sign for her and said that her face is bruised. That way the nurses and stuff don't keep checking her and waking her. It was just a very crazy experience for me, and I felt like I was in a movie because it just happened so fast. Everything worked out and my baby's here and she's happy and she's healthy and she's eating like crazy. She's been cluster feeding since she's been born, meaning she's been eating every single hour. Every hour. Do you understand the condition my nipples are in right now? I'm telling you guys, this is a very TMI video. That's my labor and delivery story. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please leave me a comment and let me know if you guys experienced something similar. If you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to my channel, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!
Your precious words echo in my ears, hoping